The name came from another trailblazer, Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman to run on a major ticket for president back in 1968. And this quote is attributed to her, that if they don't give you a seat at the table, get your chair and bring your own seat to the table. And so that's kind of where the broadcast started. And I think we're about 5 or 6 years old now into broadcasting. And so I tried to focus on issues of and related to women of color from our perspective, as opposed to being talked at and being told what and how and why. I try to have our authentic voices on the broadcast, a guest or guests that represent our authentic voices each and every month on a particular topic. So again, thank you so much for making the time to be here. I know that you have, like I said, you've been busy. Not that you're probably ever not busy, but I know that you've been particularly busy the last few weeks. So again, thank you. So speaking of trailblazers, I would consider you to be one as well. I don't know if you see yourself like that, but I would definitely consider you to be a trailblazer in the the profession that you've chosen. And so my first question to you, honestly, is how did this all get started for you? When you came here from, I think, Cincinnati to go to BU, did you know this was what you wanted to do?
Um, well, first, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to have a seat at this table. And of
You're
course, I'm
welcome.
very familiar with that Shirley Chisholm quote. Shirley Chisholm is a formidable influence in my life as the first Black woman elected to Congress. And a little known fact, until 2 weeks ago, my office in Congress was Shirley Chisholm's former office. There are very many serendipitous ways with which she has shown up in my life. My mother, I think a parent is a child's first teacher, and I had an extraordinary one in my mother. And she would read me the speeches of Barbara Jordan and Shirley Chisholm as a child instead of traditional bedtime stories or nursery rhymes.
Wow.
And in fact, when my mother transitioned after a long and valiant battle with leukemia, and as an only child, I was her caregiver. Um, I was trusting and believing that there would be another miracle, and we would not lose her. But apparently, she knew differently. It's sort of in her bones, as is so often
Hmm.
the case. And she had been creating a journal for me um,
Mm.
after once she transitioned. And the last tab of this sort of book, this journal she put together for me, said for inspiration, and it was speeches from Shirley Chisholm. So I just again offer that to say that a parent is a child's first teacher. I had an extraordinary one in my mother, and that's really where it all began. On the quote that you just referenced, that is one that I've sort of amended
Hmm.
in my own voice to say that if we bring a new chair to an old table, nothing changes. And so in this moment,
Mm.
that we are building an entirely new table. And I think that is what is underway as we see greater leadership parity and representation when it comes to women and women of color at every level of government and in every industry and discipline. I am originally, actually, I was raised in Chicago. I was born in Ohio, but
Okay.
I was raised in Chicago and then journeyed here in 1992 to attend Boston University.
Gotcha. So that actually is a great segue into a question I had for you. With with the growth in that we see in women, particularly women of color, but women in general in politics and in public service, what do you think that portends anything for the future? What do you think it says? Aside from what you just said, that we're building a new table, but what should we expect? What do you expect to come from this? Do you see us just kind of forging forward? Do you think there'll be some bumps in the road? We may kind of take a step back and then go forward again. What do you think?
Well, I think it's both and. The fact of the matter is, when women are leading, which we have always done and continue to do in our faith houses, in community, in civic and electoral politics, at the ballot box, on the ballot.
Absolutely.
You know, we're always leading, and we've never needed a comma and a title to do so. But I think that just because you do have a title does not mean that you are exempt from the disparate injustices or health disparities, misogyny, misogynoir, sexism, threats that women, sexual violence. I mean, I've been Black my whole life. I have been a girl and now a woman, for most of my life. And, I'm not exempt from things
Right.
because I have a title. In fact, I think to be Black and to be a woman is this dichotomy of being hyper visible and invisible at the same time. And so everything that we as Black women do is political. You know, my choice as someone living with alopecia totalis, robbed of all the hair on my head, my face, and my body in 5 weeks because of this autoimmune disease, it is an intentional choice. For many, that is disruptive, how I show up, because everything a Black woman does is political. So how I show up in the world with intention disrupts people's conventional societal norms about what is professional, what is feminine, what is pretty, what is appropriate. So I'm hyper visible, but at the same time, as a Black woman, I'm hyper invisible. Where our humanity isn't centered, our dignity is often not centered. People would be blind to the maternal morbidity crisis or the impact of student debt on Black women, or health disparities. So we are policed and our bodies criminalized. Young girls are put on a pathway to confinement in our learning communities simply for how we show up in the world. So to be Black and to be a woman is to be hyper visible and invisible at the same time. So I am encouraged by the increased representation, but it doesn't exempt us from experiencing the same injustices. Finally, I will say, what I always want to see where there are more women at policy and decision-making tables and corridors of power is a change in policy. Symbolism and representation have their place, their power, and their impact. But ultimately, this is not for a contrived moment of kumbaya. It's not for cuter pictures. It's not so we can pat ourselves on the back about all our progress and how much better we're doing. It's for impact. Because when the people developing policies all have the same homogenized worldview, if the policies being raised and the solutions being championed are through a monolithic or homogenized prism, that's to the disadvantage of everyone. When I was first elected to the Boston City Council as the first woman of color, first Black woman to serve on that body in its 100-year history, reporters often asked me, who was suffering before your election, women or Black people? And I always said everyone, because when government is not representative of the citizenry it serves, it does a disservice to everyone. So as an example, the first budget cycle that I had in 2009 as a Boston City councilor, every agency that came before us, I would say, what about the girls? Because that's my ministry. That's my heart's work. What about the girls? And they barely had monosyllabic answers. But Karin, by the second budget cycle, they came with multicolored cross-tab binders because they knew that someone would call the question. And that is the power of representation, that someone is going to call the question, informed by their lived experience and worldview.
Right. Someone is going to call the question and someone is going to hold you accountable. It's not a pass anymore. So you said that your ministry is to young girls or young women. How did that come about?
When I was on the Boston City Council, actually prior to that, this is why I ran for city council. I was to Senator Kerry, and I was serving on a number of nonprofit boards, supporting girls in their safety, development, their wellness, and their health. And I would give my cell phone number to every girl I met. And they would call me at all hours of the night. I can't afford sanitary napkins. Can you help me? I have a family member who is crossing boundaries, and I feel vulnerable around, or I've been violated by a family member, and I heard that happen to you. Can you help me? My boyfriend is pressuring me to have sex, or I have questions about my sexuality. I mean, they were always calling. And what it affirmed for me, and I knew this from my own lived experience, having been a girl at some point, and now a woman, that there had been such a disproportionate emphasis on how at and proven risk Black and brown boys are, but girls had been completely, again, invisible, even though we were growing up in the same conditions, under many of the same threats, right? And so I ran for city council, and I said I was running to save girls that didn't even know they needed saving. And people told me to go run a nonprofit. That wasn't the work of city government. And I knew better, that we needed gender specific and responsive programming and policies to meet the unique needs of girls and to address the issues that disproportionately impact women. And so I created the first ever standing policy committee on the Boston City Council. It still exists, and 2 other municipalities in the country have replicated it. It's the Committee on Healthy Women, Families, and Communities, the first policy committee to name the issue of trauma. And I remember, and I'll close here, in my candidacy for city council, when I would say I was running to save girls, and again, there were many a naysayer who said that wasn't the work of city government. My own home community, Black folks would say, but it's the boys that are dying. And I would say, this is not the oppression Olympics. The girls are slowly dying right in front of you. The girls are growing up to be women who are raising these boys, when 1 in 4 of us are survivors of domestic or sexual violence. So what I know is that broken girls grow up to be broken women. And I wanted to stand in the gap, and I wanted to advance policies and create an ecosystem and infrastructure that supported girls and growing into being, fully evolved, developed, healthy women. You know, what I want is for every young girl to be able to be themselves fully, authentically, unapologetically, without fear and without discrimination. And so that is my heart's work, because it's just my ministry and what I was called to do, to stand in the gap for all the girls like me. I'm a survivor of a near decade of childhood sexual abuse, intra-family sexual abuse, again, something Black families don't often like to talk about. I'm a survivor of campus sexual assault. My father is a survivor of mass incarceration, which is why I was being raised in a single parented household. I saw my mother abused physically in her intimate partner relationships. I saw my mother train men that were then later promoted over her. I saw my mother struggling because she was not getting paid equitably. I saw my mother bending over with pain from her fibroids, which I also inherited. I saw my mother rush to the hospital because she collapsed in the street after a radical hysterectomy at the age of 46 because of those fibroids, and she couldn't get paid leave. So because my mother raised me alone and I'm an only child, I was able to see my mother as a woman and not just as my mother.
Right.
And so because I saw her heartbreaks, because I saw her hardship, it is for all those reasons that I'm very passionate in my legislative advocacy on behalf of girls and women.
I'm a firm believer that even the hardships that we endure in life, encounter in life, and particularly the ones when we're children that really have an impact on shaping us, that they're not for nothing. You would not be this passionate about your work if you had not had some of those struggles, if you had not seen some of that stuff firsthand. And you said a very important thing. Most of us don't get to this until later in life, but it's so important, I think, for us as daughters to get to the point where we see our mothers as women, not just mommy. I would often say about my mother, Betty was Betty before she ever became Karen's mother, and Betty was broken, and Betty brought that brokenness into her parenting of me, and we kind of figured it out together. Another thing you said that made me think of something when you talked about young girls and wanting them to be fully evolved rather, and themselves and comfortable with how they look, how they present, who they are, their talents, their shortcomings, their strengths, etc., and not apologetic for that. Um, I think I'm not sure if you know, so I've been a clinical social worker for the last 40 years. And for 10 years, I was at the Trotter School. And at that point, Trotter was maybe, I think they were K-6 at the point, or K-5. And people would see me, you know what they say about social workers, like, oh, that's such rewarding work. You must love it. And they would say to me often, like, oh, you like working with kids? Oh, that's so amazing, Karin. You love kids. And I would say, well, I do. I mean, I love children, but I'd say, no, I love healthy adults. And I believe the way I can best make an impact towards making that happen is to get them when they're young.
Amen.
And to
thank you for that work. And I would just say that I've often, quoted Barack Obama in talking about educators, referring to them as nation builders, but that's true for you. Because our greatest wealth as a nation is the health of our people, and so when you are pouring into these little people who go on to be nation builders, we hope to build rather than to tear down. That's a credit and a testament to you. Certainly Black social workers matter, so I do want to just affirm.
Yeah, that's true.
So we thank you for that ministry.
Thank you. No thanks necessary. I really have loved it. All these, like, almost 40 years. The other thing that I found that working with children gave me the opportunity to do many times was to invest into their moms, to invest into, you bring a child to me because they need counseling or whatever. And what I find in the mental health system is we tend to villainize the parents, and we want to save the kids from their parents and from their families without fully knowing the story. And so I'll never forget a quick incident I had. A mom was going to court. They were, trying to take her kids from her. And she would come into school often with her slippers on, the rag around her head, her pajama bottoms, and a sweatshirt. And I said to her one day, honey, I said, so you're going to court tomorrow, right? And she said, yeah. I said, you know why you're going, right? Yeah. I said, I hope this doesn't offend you, but what are you wearing to court? And she said, my jeans, I figured, and like a shirt. And I said, no. I said, if you never hear anything else from me, your hair is beautiful. I want you to take that scarf off your hair, comb it out. I said, do you have a sweater or a button-down shirt? I do. Wear that tomorrow. Do you have pants besides? Do you have slacks? Yeah. I said, do you have loafers or flat shoes? Yeah. That's what you're going to court with tomorrow. I said, because they will judge you in 0.5 seconds, right? So if you want, she was articulate, but that whole presentation, that could just wipe the whole case out. And so as she was walking out of my office, I still wasn't sure that I hadn't offended her, but as she was walking out of my office, she turned and she said, Ms. Wall, you didn't offend me at all. She said, I'm 30. She said, and people assume because I'm 30 that there are things that I was taught and that I know, and I don't. She said, so thank you for saying that to me and not looking at me like, you're a 30-year-old woman, you ought to know these things. So those are some of the high points and fun things about the work over the years.
Thank you for sharing that story. I did want to just two things. One, I don't know if you can see what I'm wearing, but it was important to me to wear this today. This is a sweatshirt. It's Martin and Coretta. You can see she's kissing his cheek.
Yeah.
And And it's his quote where he talks about he's decided to choose love because hate is too, heavy a burden to bear. But I wanted to wear that because as we talk about one, throughout history, the erasure of the role of Black women, something that movies like Selma tried to set straight, or movies like Hidden Figures tried to set straight, right? Black women are often a footnote or completely erased. And I think that the totality of who Coretta was is something that was consumed by the awesomeness and history's telling of Martin. And as if Coretta only picked up the mantle in the wake of his assassination, when in fact, one of the reasons he fell in love with this Black woman who was high school valedictorian and came to college on scholarship was because of her brilliance. And in fact, her progressive values and vision. She, in many ways, brought him along. So she was a trusted, confidant and strategist and counselor in her own right. And so I did just want to highlight that if that wasn't being seen in the frame, and why
I'm glad you said that.
I was doing that, because I'm speaking of attire. I wouldn't want you to be offended that I was not dressed, more traditionally, professionally.
No.
But I was being self-indulgent because I wanted to wear this sweatshirt, and also because it's from a Black-owned company called Mess in a Bottle. But I also wanted to say, get to know who are the other three women at the table, because speaking of how you're raised, I was told to never break bread without knowing who you're breaking bread with. So I would not want them to think I have poor manners. So
fair enough.
Who else is there? Okay.
So Atia, would you like to?
Oh, okay. She's not mic'd. Okay, Karin, you want to just tell me who's there?
Atia Charlie over here with the white jacket on.
Hi,
and are you a Boston native? You said it. Boston native. You're an event planner.
Okay.
You're a member of the illustrious sorority, Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. Okay, whose Founders Day is tomorrow. All right.
Get it all in, Karin. Get it all in. Okay.
And next to Atia is Jennifer Scruggs, who's actually our chapter president. Jennifer hails from Tennessee, correct? Lord only knows why you're up here, but we'll just let that be. And what do you do professionally, Jennifer? She's an HR manager. And I'm sorry, and Atia, you're an event planner and 9 to 5 as an executive assistant. And then to my left here, Lauren Govan Wise, longtime friend, works for the T. What do you do for the T? A trainer? Supervisor of Workforce Logistics.
Okay. You know what, Karin, I liked about that? Now I'm sure you've known, are these your sorority sisters?
2 are, yeah.
Okay, so you've known them a long time. And I find it's interesting, sometimes with your closest friends, you don't even actually know what they do, because that's not what you lead with, right? I remember going to an event here in Boston. Boston is some pretentious folk, who lead with their title and their cards a lot of the time. Yes. And so when no shade, Boston, very proud to represent you, love you, okay? But and I do represent Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Randolph, Everett, Chelsea, and a little bit of Milton, so people know that, okay? Majority parts Boston, majority parts Cambridge, all of Somerville, Randolph, Everett, Chelsea, and Milton, okay? That's the Massachusetts 7. But so I went to this event that was actually organized by Boston While Black, shout out to Sheena Collier and the whole team over there, and it was called the B-Side. And the whole point of the event is that each person, when you introduced yourself, you had to lead with your B-side. You couldn't say, and I work for, and this and that. You had, and it's called the B-side because I collect vinyl. I don't know, I'm 48, so I don't know if y'all remember records, but a lot of times it was very rare that an album was like really good, A and B.
Right.
And so people usually only played the A side. It was only if you was really into that artist that you even knew the B-side, if you really, really knew them, right? And so I just think that was so interesting right there, because you had to say, well, tell me what you do again and what's your title, this, that, because when you're really when you have that relationship with someone, your fellowship is about something so much deeper, than that. It's not that you don't care about their life and what they do,
Right.
But how your relationship is defined is by something different. And it's
Right.
usually the B side.
Right. It's so interesting that you would say that, because I've talked to these ladies at different times about how that's a particular pet peeve of mine. And I've noticed that in certain communities, that's what you lead with. And so, like, say I've been on a board and a new board member comes in and they come over, you're having a little greeting and everything, meet and greet. And the question is not, hi, Karen, it's, what do you do?
Right. Yeah.
And
It's a very different question from who are you?
exactly. And so this one particular time, I don't know whether it was just a bad day or I was just particularly fed up. And I put my food down and I said, are you asking who I am or what I do for 9 to 5? And she was just,
Right.
sure. And normally I don't do that, but that day I was just kind of like, that is telling you what I do tells you nothing about me. So would you like to know Karen, or would you just like to know superficially what I do for 9 to 5? But I want to go back to yesterday. What was it like being there at the unveiling of of that statue?
Well, first of all, I was so honored to be invited to offer words at that event. And it is always unenviable to be towards the end of a program. One, I would just say creatively, and as someone who, hopes to be a decent, orator in my presentation, that the longer you're sitting, the more you start rewriting, because you're sort of getting caught up in what you're hearing, and it was glorious. I felt fully present. I felt fully present. I felt grateful. I felt humbled by the magnitude of it all. And I felt just so happy because I've long been an admirer of Coretta Scott and Coretta Scott King, and just felt that she was never really given her just due. And I just love the fact that now, in the permanent artistic DNA, in the physical infrastructure of this city, because statues and monuments and having equity in them matters. That representation matters. I just felt so hopeful and encouraged by the power of this representation in the oldest park in our nation.
Yeah.
A monument made possible because of, quite literally, the brilliant and gifted hands of a Black sculptor, a Black artist, of Black architects and Black creators. An effort, founded by Paul English and Liz Walker and Reverend Jeffrey Brown, and prior to Amari Jeffries, who has stewarded this helm exceptionally, Maurice St. Fleur, preceded him and did an extraordinary job. And now this was all, coming to pass. And Yolanda Renee King, the King, Coretta and Martin's only grandchild, when she said that this was Love 360, she's such a prophetic and eloquent voice at such a young age. And that was very appropriately phrased. Love 360.
I thought the same thing.
Yeah. So it was a glorious day. I felt very humbled and honored to even be in proximity to the unveiling, much less to have an opportunity to bring some insights and reflections.
Have you seen, there's probably many, but there is a gorgeous picture I found of you on the internet. I don't know what was going on, but it looks like you were soaking in every moment of whatever was being said. And you were kind of resting one hand on your folder or your portfolio, and no, this hand. and your eyes were closed and you had your hand over your shoulder like this, and someone was holding your hand behind
Yes.
you.
Okay, so I
And
haven't seen that picture, but we were, pardon me, we were saying a prayer, and
that's what it looked like.
I was holding my husband's hand.
Okay. It
Yeah,
looked beautiful.
yeah, I was
It was
holding
just
my husband.
absolutely beautiful. And it looked like whatever was going on, you were just kind of completely taking it
Yeah,
in.
it was just again, as I said, I hope that this serves, now that we have the embrace on Boston Common, that it serves as a visual prompt, and it's a space of reverence, and it feels sacred, and that people
Mhm.
derive inspiration, restore hope, renew their resolve in the work of justice. That is my hope. And so those were all the things that I was feeling in that moment. And of course, people were asking me, reporters and journalists asked me, um, was this a signal of, some sort of more permanent progress to come in the city of Boston? And I said, symbols matter, and that parity
Mhm.
and representation matters. But ultimately, if we want to change the narrative of Boston, we'll have to change the impact and the outcome, and ensure that every citizen in this city is equitably met.
Yeah.
And so the symbolism is important, but the substance, marrying it with the substance of impact
Mhm.
and the actualization of justice is what will really change the
Right.
narrative in the storied history of
Going
Boston
forward.
in the
Yeah.
midst of a still struggling present.
So our ladies have some questions for you, and since they're not mic'd, I'm going to take the
Okay.
question. And this is
And I
Jennifer's
think
question.
and I know I have a member of my team on, so he'll keep us honest on time because
Okay.
it is MLK
Okay.
weekend. So I do have some other
Okay.
things. So he'll let us know. Okay. I
Okay.
just will communicate to Pastor Wall or someone in the chat about
Okay.
my timing. Okay, ladies, what are your questions?
So, is it a challenge to continue working with individuals who took part in or were complacent with what went on at the Capitol on January 6th?
I love that nice softball question. Is it challenging to work with people who participated in sedition conspiracy, who incited an insurrection, who emboldened white supremacy? Absolutely.
Mhm.
But I need only, look back on my ancestors and just summon all of the resolve and the fortitude that they did to do what I must do every day. I remember after the January 6th insurrection, when they put up a bunch of new scaffolding and physical infrastructure,
Mhm.
and they put in mag detectors and just knew all these sorts of physical security things. And people would ask me, do you feel safer? And I said, well, I might, but it's not about me feeling safer in the Capitol. It's about Black folk and all marginalized people feeling safe in this country.
Mhm.
And so that's the work that we're doing every day. And I think I know we're not, I should not be partisan here, but I would say, as a Democrat serving in a Republican majority, so being in the minority for the next 2 years, I
Mhm.
believe we have 2 years to make the affirmative case for Democrats. And I think how
Yes.
this Congress started with complete chaos and incompetent governance. I hope it just makes the contrast that much clearer in terms of who should be governing and leading this country. And it certainly is not those insurrectionists. They should have been held accountable and expelled, not being sworn in
Absolutely.
for another term.
Absolutely. Okay, question number 2. What have been some of the challenges you face on your journey of being the first Black women to be elected to the city council and to Congress? Oh, and that's it? Oh, okay.
Well, I think being a first is an extraordinary blessing and
Mhm.
also a unique burden and responsibility.
Yeah.
So, what is freeing about it is that you're your own analog. There was no one before you,
Mm.
but what is frightening is that you're your own analog, right? So there's not a stabilizing reference point or person because you are the first. And of course, I just feel a tremendous sense of responsibility to be a righteous steward of whatever gifts God has endowed me with, and with what the electorate has entrusted me to do.
So I'm gonna let you, well, I think we probably have to leave around 2:45-ish. That's what Ricardo told me before.
Okay.
So I'm gonna try to stick with that. But I want to just add a little levity to the conversation and then ask for a closing statement from you. And I'll tell you what that is in a minute. So when I first started researching for the broadcast, I mean, I, kind of knew some basic things, right? And okay, she's from Boston. I live in Boston, blah, blah, blah. Bruce, we know a lot of same people. What I didn't know is we know a lot of the same people. So Erin Douglas.
Oh,
she and my daughter went to City on a Hill, graduated the same year.
Wow.
And watching Erin from 9th grade on, I knew she was headed somewhere.
Yes.
That little powerhouse, right?
Okay, so I don't know if in your research, if you found out that we're also Aquariuses. And so I just want to say, that I think that is very consistent with our sign. So she's an incredible humanitarian, such a force. And she's been in my life since she was 16 years old. She interned in my city council office, worked on my congressional campaign, worked in my congressional office, met her future husband in my office.
Yes.
I will be marrying them. Yes, I will be officiating their wedding, and now she and her fiance Anthony, also known as the Davis system, they are consultants. So very full circle.
She and my daughter keep up pretty regularly, and so I didn't hear this last part about you officiating the wedding, and that they actually met through you, but I thought that they'd met when she was in Washington, D.C. So
yes, they did in Washington, D.C. I'm sort of like a Jewish yenta. I have an incredible record of matchmaking. I need y'all to know.
You?
Oh, yes. I've gotten 6 people together and married.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm an excellent matchmaker.
So, and in terms of Aquarius, my birthday is next week. So another very good friend of mine, Katrina Huff Larmon from Randolph, right? That's my girl.
Oh, I love her. I was very excited to support her in her state house run, but I'm grateful to still have her leading on the municipal level.
And she's not done. So
I know.
Right. The other thing is you have a cat.
Yes. So I love animals. That is, it just takes me out of everything. You're just fully present. And that's some of my therapy. So I love all animals, but my life won't allow me to really have a dog. So we do have a cat. And this is my 3rd cat, also a rescue. And her name is Sojourner Truth Pressley Harris. And when she goes to the vet, they just crack up because we have her name on everything, Sojourner Truth Pressley Harris. But we call her Sojo. That's our nickname for her.
Okay.
And when I first named her,
we have to work on that.
When I first named her, my husband said, "Does everybody in this family have to do the work of abolition? Can the cat get a break? Couldn't we just name her socks or boots?" I'm like,
okay.
No.
So similarly, we have a cat now. We've always been a dog family, but we have a cat now. She was a rescue, and I named her Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Oh, nice, KJB. And KBJ, yeah.
Bruce, my kids would like, "Mom, you be an extra. Why are you always extra?" They said the same thing. Fluffy, muffins, Bootsy, kittens, or something, right? Why can't they have a normal cat name?
Take up space. Do the most, sis. Do the most. Okay.
And finally, I don't know if you remember this, but a few months back, I called you with a Medicare situation.
Yes.
And I shout out to Colin because he was responsive, and every time I reached out to him, and whenever he got an update, he passed it along to me. Mind you, it still took Medicare 5 months. I just got it reinstated last week, but I wanted you to know your staff was
Karin,
amazing.
let me tell you something. This to me is the most important part of this interview. Other than I do like that you were asking B-side questions. We're making B-side points there. I appreciate that. But this is the most important part because certainly I work in Washington, but I can only do that because I haven't forgotten who I work for, and that is the people. And so the mark of any elected official is about their team and about constituent services. And Colin in my Hyde Park based office, he's my director of constituent services. He does an extraordinary job. He was with me in my city council staff as well. But shout out to Colin and really the whole team. I call them my A team. They're pretty extraordinary. And I know, having been an aide for 16 years, I was with John Kerry 11 years, right. Former United States Senator John Kerry 11 years. And I was with Congressman Joseph P. Kennedy II for 4 years. So I know that sometimes your staff will represent you better than you represent yourself. So the mark of any good elected office is that of a dedicated and talented and passionate team. And I certainly do have that. And one last thing I'll share with you, which isn't in any of the research, and that is how full circle it is and serendipitous that I am now the Congresswoman for the seat that I started in as an intern 25 plus years ago, working as an unpaid intern, working 3 jobs to do that unpaid internship. Now we pay all of our interns in Congress a living wage, because that was a barrier to entry, into politics for so many. Right. And but I worked 3 paid jobs through that unpaid internship, which completely changed the trajectory of my life, and never could have anticipated coming here from Chicago, Boston, adopted home, a city where I didn't know a soul, that I would crystallize my purpose, that I would find the love of my life, and that my journey would take me to Boston City Hall and eventually to the U.S. House of Representatives.
Kudos, really, kudos to you. You're doing an amazing job. So proud of you. Bruce is telling me you have 1 minute, and Ricardo is telling me you have a few minutes.
Okay.
So, closing comment to the young girls or a young lady who sees this. We upload it, and it kind of goes around. So who sees this and is either toying with, or maybe is in disbelief, like, man, she could do that, but I couldn't. What would you say to her?
Well, the first thing I want to say is you are enough. As women of faith, we're very familiar with that adage that, God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies those that are called. Right. And I think, women will have amassed degrees or not, served on numerous boards, led in community, and someone will see something in them and say, you should do this. And we will talk ourselves out of it, discredit ourselves, say, I need one more degree, one more certificate, one more prayer, one more this, but you are enough. And if you're talking about politics in particular, just by the very nature of your lived experience, you are qualified. You are qualified. So you are enough. You are already qualified. And something my husband always says, my husband, Conan Harris, the love of my life, I call him my black diamond, which is that we belong everywhere. And so I would just, offer that word to someone as well, take up space, take up.
Absolutely.
I think that's so important because, again, coming from Chicago, where I did have a Black mayor in Harold Washington, I did have a female mayor in Jane Byrne, and I did go on scholarship to a very small private school. And when I came to Boston, it seemed that there were these invisible sort of boundaries and these assumptions about where we could go and where we couldn't. And I just want us to move with the same entitlement that mediocre men do.
Yes.
And that is, that we are entitled to good things. You know, we are entitled to take our seat, you know, at this table or any place where decisions are being made about us. Entitlement is not a bad thing.
No, it's
It
not.
really isn't. So,
Mm.
you know, so those are my final words. I would just say, you are enough. You belong everywhere. And to not see walls and to move with that sense of self-agency and even entitlement. Because you are entitled to all good things. You are entitled to a government that meets your needs.
Right.
You are entitled to a community where you feel safe and where you can thrive. You are entitled to fulfill the potential that you know that God has designed for your life. So I think those are my final words. And then the two most important words in any language, I'll just say thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm being told by Bruce, wrap it up. Thank you again so much for making the time. You've been amazing.
My sisters.
And thank you to you guys. All right, thank you so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
So we've got a few more minutes, right, Pastor Wall? So I'm just going to take some liberty and shout out Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, founded January 16th, 1920 on the campus of Howard University. We will be celebrating 103 years, I'm correct, tomorrow. Our pillars of our organization: finer womanhood, sisterhood, scholarship, and community service, right? And that's what we do. With this community service, you will see the blue and white family, right? And I also just want to say, we're doing amazing things in the Commonwealth. We really are. We've got an amazing state director in Sharina Wright Esquire. We have got great chapter presidents. And as I said before, our chapter president is here. Wave, Jennifer, because they can't see you. Jennifer Scruggs, our state event planner, right? Atia Charlie. So, and Lauren is just my friend. So, right. So think about us tomorrow, January 16th, as we celebrate longevity, as we celebrate commitment to our purpose, commitment to our mission. The other thing, last thing I want to say about that is I would encourage, if you don't know, if you've just heard the term D9 and you don't know what that means, I would encourage you to find out, because it's way more than what people assume it is. We're not like some other fraternal or sororities in that of other cultures. Black Greek letter organizations have a very specific mission and purpose. Their inception was very specific and purpose driven. And the fact that we have survived this long means that we still continue to have a mission and purpose. And we look forward to another 103 years of developing, sowing into the community, sowing into the lives of young women, and those young women making contributions to the committee. So thank you.